Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the YouTube video, Death of Materialism, and specifically von Neumann's chain and this quote, "The chain keeps going back until you get to something that is not bound by the same rules." Listen as we discuss what we are calling life is observation dependent, and it is the observer that sets the measurement. How we think is what we become. In this show, we will integrate modern science with ancient religion to demonstrate why Albert Einstein said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and know the scientific truth of religion. Swami, I see the title of today's show is "You're Pulling My Chain." Can you give us a recap as to why you chose that title and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I grew up with the saying, "You're pulling my chain," or "You're pulling my leg," which meant putting me on, or you're telling me an untruth or a lie. And it was mostly meant in jest or fun, but sometimes led to problems and arguments. And after listening to Death of Materialism, we're looking at the collective or world mind chain pull, which we're all accepting and living under the rules of karma. The laws of physics seem to correspond with the laws of karma. For every action, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. As a man soweth, so too shall he reap. So more and more we're starting to see that there's cosmic chain pull, that what we're calling reality or life isn't life at all, that it's a false story. And I thought maybe we would go over that YouTube video, Death of Materialism, and then incorporate some of the divine science that we've been going over to try and come up to maybe a little different conclusion.
Okay, well, we talked about Albert Einstein's quote, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." But let's talk about what we mean by the word religion before we begin.
Yeah, religion means relink. And the intention of religion, in my opinion, is to relink the individual with the divine, as opposed to the mental, physical, unreal sense of creation. It also appears that it is one of the biggest failings that I found in organized religion today, is that it really doesn't do what it said it was to do, which we've talked about this a number of times, comes under the heading of the split between science and religion. Now religion is a belief system. It's no longer a demonstrable principle. We're not proving the presence of divine law. We are believing in it. And then what we're finding is this human experience is driven by belief.
All right, so let's go back to the quote that we had in the opening by von Neumann. That quote again, I'll read it. "That chain keeps going back until you get to something that is not bound by the same rules." So let's start talking about von Neumann's chain.
Yeah, von Neumann's chain gives us a clue to understand spiritual healing and how it may differ from the mental physical healing, because Spiritual law is not bound by the same rules as material law or karmic law. In the Bible, the command really is repent. But what it translates to mean is think differently. In her book, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, Mary Baker Eddy talks about 3 modes of mortal thought. And in revelations in the Bible, we really have to learn to come out of these modes of mortal thinking with our material senses, thinking in terms of duality. And then we have to cultivate spiritual sense. In order to demonstrate spiritual law, we must assume spiritual identity. And so it's a process. We are actually changing our sense of self. We are rising from a material physical sense into a mental sense, and then eventually into spiritual identity in this process. But what we want to establish here is the scientific discoveries today that they're making are reinforcing what Mary Baker Eddy said with her discovery of Christian science.
So let's begin to try to make those correlations between the two. Do you want to start with Death of Materialism, some of the quotes that we have?
Yeah, my understanding for Death of Materialism is that they're really starting to find what we're calling reality is observation dependent. And some of the things that they say, one is matter doesn't exist as a wave of energy prior to observation, but as a wave of mathematical possibilities. The waviness is not the probability of the object being in a particular place. There is a crucial difference here. The object was not there before you found it there. That's one of the quotes we have.
So how do you explain that? Like if I look outside and I see a tree, so you're saying if I'm not looking at that tree's not there?
And that's what science is starting to tell us. It's almost exactly the way Mary Baker Eddy said it. Matter is a mental image. You're looking at your thought about what's really there. Now, what's really there is the divine creation, which is the spiritual fact or the spiritual reality behind your thought. But we are stopping at the thought and we are reacting to the thought because we think it's real. And so science is really starting to support everything that Mary Baker Eddy discovered.
So it's not just what I see out the window. We're also talking about, you had mentioned earlier about this world thought. And that, I think, has a big influence as to what we see around us.
Yeah, what we're perceiving is really a compilation of what Mary Baker Eddy called 3 modes of mortal thought. And we explain that using the mutable signs. We're not only looking at world thought being televised to our consciousness, but then that is also being disguised and internalized as my thought. And it gets pretty complicated because, say, for example, if you've ever been in a situation where you are an eyewitness of a particular event, you and 15 other people, and when they get each person's story, it seems to differ. There may be some things about it that are similar, but in most instances, there are differences. Things are a lot more complicated. We're thinking on different levels, and plus behind our thought level is the truth of being, which is also trying to break through and capture our recognition of it.
Well, I see the next quote that we have from the Death of Materialism, the YouTube video, is, "There is no physical particle prior to measurement." And I think we just kind of talked a little bit about that. Is there anything else we should dig a little deeper about?
Well, I think the next quote that we have might help us understand. Atomic events we have to do with things and facts, the phenomena that are just as real as any phenomena in the daily life. But the atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts. And that was from Werner Heisenberg. and finding prior to measurement objects have no defined properties or location. The act of an observer creates the existence of the physical objects and the properties they entail. So here again, it supports a lot of what we say. How we think is what we become. But what we're also learning is that the physical world is a mental image. But the more divinely mental the image, the more harmonious and indestructible it will appear. That if we can come out of these modes of mortal thinking, thinking with our material senses, seeing only the visible and the tangible, or even in some instances, the invisible but tangible, the dualistic aspects of the wave function. Like von Neumann said, the chain keeps coming back until you get to something that is not bound by the same rules. And so when the observer thinks differently, or in this case, when we learn to stop thinking, we actually stop creating the false sense of existence. We stop pulling our own chain, and then we let the divine creation reveal itself as it actually is. Like the Bible said, except the Lord build the house, we labor in vain when we try and build it.
So Swami, earlier you said the act of an observer creates the existence of the physical objects. Well, wouldn't that be true of the measurement tools they used to perform these experiments?
Well, yeah, that's in the next quote that we have. The radical implication cannot just be ignored by saying it stops with the first interaction. The same quantum rules apply to particles that make up a measuring apparatus. So you need something else to collapse the particles for that apparatus and so on. And then it goes into the chain keeps going back until you get to something that is not bound by the same rules. As you start to delve into this, you can start to understand how Jesus could heal, or Mary Baker Eddy could heal, or anybody who sees the divine creation as opposed to stopping at the physical, mental imitation or recreation. Because conscious awareness of the divine creation lifts consciousness out of the rules or the laws of karma. There's no longer a belief in two powers. You now rise into the understanding of the one power. And the one power trumps the belief in the two. The reason is that spirit is the only self-existent power in this universe. The law of karma, or the cycle of death and rebirth, relies on belief for its existence. And that's, again, why it's important to make a distinction between physical, mental healings and spiritual healing. For all those years, we worked with thought because we understood, okay, the physical world is a mental image and thought is an energy capable of producing effects, but it's measurable based on the amount of strength that it's emitted with. So belief gives thought the power of intention. And with changing how you think and emitting your thought with belief, you can change finite bad to finite good. But if you want a God-crowned spiritual healing, then you've got to rise. You have to think differently. You have to think with divine mind. And divine mind doesn't think in terms of duality. Divine mind thinks in the absolute. It sees the whole, the eternal, changeless state of being. But consciousness is experience. If we are conscious of the finite mental, physical recreation, then we put out a finite, imperfect image. But if we are conscious of the eternal, spiritual, perfect, divine creation, then we must externalize divine qualities.
Well, we do have to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. So listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and the 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. Swami, I just want to finish up talking about von Neumann's quote about the chain, and the next one, it says, the only logical place to stop this chain is with whomever is ultimately performing the measurement, meaning the conscious observer. So I think you had talked about divine mind and the effect it would have, but how do we make this change when we're dealing with mortal mind, this universal mind?
Well, again, like I had said, repent, think differently is the way that we do it. If we think with our mortal mind, can the mind free itself of its own creation? Now, if we stop thinking with the mind that is producing the false sense of existence, and we make our mind an avenue of awareness for the presence of the divine creation, spirit, pure consciousness, in silence and in stillness, we let that divine mind take over the scientific government of our being. Now that will resolve things into thoughts, and it will exchange the objects of sense for the divine idea. The reason why it does that so effectively is because it is not bound by the same rules as the law of karma, as the false sense of existence. The false sense of existence really has no power. The only thing that has power is spirit. I like what Mary Baker Eddy says in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures on page 264-21. Matter disappears under the microscope of spirit. You can't have spiritual identity and material identity, because just like light dispels darkness, darkness isn't an opposing power to light. Matter is not an opposing power to spirit. Matter is just the absence of spiritual truth. And so when we are conscious of spiritual truth, it will dispel the belief in this false sense of existence.
So let's talk about ultimately what this video was about, what we got from that, and that was how it relates to consciousness.
Yeah, we have a couple of quotes here. One says, these implications show that consciousness is not a product of physical interactions in the brain, because if it was, it would also need to be collapsed as well. The evidence infers the need for something not bound by the same laws of quantum mechanics, which can be the cause of ultimate collapse for all of matter. For otherwise, there is no logical explanation for what causes collapse in the existence of matter. Consciousness is ultimately and philosophically the cause of the wave function and the physical existence of matter itself. And then in their final statement, the very fundamental nature of matter implies consciousness is not a product of it, but that the opposite is true. Physical matter is a product of consciousness, thus leading to an idealistic or dualistic approach to reality. The physical universe is a product of mind, and the very fundamental pieces of reality require an observer. The old view of materialism is inadequate in fitting the data. There are simply no hidden variables or interpretations of quantum mechanics that cannot account for the data without being ad hoc. Reality is dependent upon conscious observers. Eugene Vigor said, while a number of philosophical ideas may be logically consistent with present quantum mechanics, materialism is not. That's the end of the quote. And then I think maybe in some sort of comparison or bridging the gap between science and religion, for me, it looks like science is catching up to Mary Baker Eddy, but has not quite gone far enough, as she says. The universe, like man, is to be interpreted by science from its divine principle God, and then it can be understood. But when explained on the basis of physical sense and represented as subject to growth, maturity, and decay, the universe, like man, is and must continue to be an enigma. That's from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, page 12414.
Swami, let's talk more about the correlation between these two sciences, what Mary Baker Eddy was talking about, and then what this video, Death of Materialism, is talking about.
Well, I think the meeting ground is consciousness, that they're using the word consciousness. Now, what we have to understand is, in this model, consciousness is experience. And whatever it is that we are conscious of is what we are going to experience. That if we are conscious of things visible and tangible, then we will have an experience under the law of karma. Whatever it is that we put out is what we are going to get back. If we are conscious of things that are invisible but tangible, the mental world, the world of energy, that which is invisible but tangible, is also dualistic, and we are still under the law of karma. Whatever it is that we put out is what we get back. But if we can rise into what is invisible and intangible, which is pure consciousness, unadulterated consciousness, it hasn't been divided, then we are under the divine law of absolute life.
So let's go back to the cosmic chain and this pull and how it's revealed to us.
Yeah, and I think to answer what it is that you're talking about, the cosmic chain pull here being revealed, I really think we have to turn to divine science for that. And I have a quote here from Bicknell Young. He wrote a paper called Addresses, and the heading of the chapter that I'm reading is Body. This material concept of body is not body at all. Mrs. Eddy says mortals are material falsities. We become masters of the body in proportion that we see the nothingness of matter. The body is not material. Even this body is not material. It is nothing but material beliefs. And I'll stop there. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, to find out this physical world isn't real was a really interesting shock for me. And as I started to challenge my original beliefs and concepts and theories, I started working with this principle. There's only one perfect divine life. The divine creation is the only reality. And that what I was calling life was my thought about what was here. And so I'm in this mental recreation. I am creating my reality. Basically, what I found that all I was doing was trying to figure out how the unreal became real. If you want to come out of that, you really have to stop thinking with the mind that is creating the false sense of existence and think differently, which means that now you've got to graduate from material sense to spiritual sense. And then what you start to do, it's kind of like what Bicknell Young says here. We become masters of the body in proportion that we see the nothingness of matter. By learning and accepting spiritual identity and living in the knowledge of the infinite spiritual body starts to take care of what seems to be a personal physical body.
Well, then the next thing he says in that paper is, as a claim, mortal mind claims to be alive in the material body, but there never was a moment when there was any life in a material body. Now, that's going to be a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow.
Yeah, I know that. And what we're learning is thought really has to be educated up to spiritual apprehension. If you have a willingness to let go of these material moorings and these concepts, theories, and beliefs that we have established on a material level, then you're open to this new way of thinking. But the beauty of it is that it's not driven by belief. The spiritual fact is a demonstrable principle. You really don't want to be talking about divine science. You really want to prove the presence of the divine creation. That's the role of healing in this model. The miracle. Jesus did all of his teaching by his works. Who's going to argue with something you can see on a visible and tangible level? When somebody has a condition and then all of a sudden is instantaneously relieved of that condition. Now, to material sense, it will appear as if the body was fixed, but all that really happened was the revealing of the truth. The divine creation was always there.
Well, I like what he says next. What you call the human body is the concept of mortal mind. You must see that everything in matter is unreal. Nobody has a material body. It is untrue that we are looking at each other. We do not exist that way. And again, like I said before, there's going to be a lot of people that would really have a problem with these statements.
Well, I guess the best reply to that would be is you're pulling my chain. And I think as collectively, as we start to assimilate more and more of the wisdom that is found in divine science, and more we start to prove the presence of the divine creation, then the tipping point won't be that far away. Because when you're working with a demonstrable principle, that for Mary Baker Eddy, healing wasn't guesswork, and she was scientifically proving the presence of the perfection of being. And little by little, as we start to stop thinking in our traditional corporeal sense way, and we start knowing the truth, life is perfect, and then you start proving that, and then you start raising consciousness on a collective level, then it won't be so far-fetched. And it's kind of like the flat earth theory. I mean, for all those hundreds of years or thousands of years, people thought the earth was flat. And yet all of our thinking the earth was flat didn't flatten the earth. Our thought really doesn't affect the divine creation at all. And so the divine creation is very patient. It's not going anywhere, and it will wait for us collectively to realize this truth. And then once we are starting to prove it with scientific certainty, then it won't be such a stretch for people. But in the meantime, if you have an interest in learning this, you really have to educate your thought up to spiritual apprehension, that there is only one life. One perfect divine life, and it's the only life I am.
So I like how he summarizes his work, and he says, what you call your body is nothing but a human sense of identity, but such identity is infinite, so of course there is no material man.
I think science is starting to catch up with. We're starting to understand that this is a spiritual universe. And we are an eternal spiritual being.
Well, we do have to start closing down our show for today, so listeners, be sure to visit the website, www.ipdtransform.com. On the homepage, you see the fading banner, Blog Talk Radio. If you click that, that will direct you to the Blog Talk Radio Show catalog page. And then by clicking on the Products tab and then Online Classes, directs you to all the classes that Swami has available for you. Swami, any final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and know the scientific truth of religion. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.